Today, let me tell you all about Conan's long-lost brother from another mother, whose name is Su Qian. Like many other main characters, he caught the transmigration trend, but his beginning was a bit damn miserable. As soon as he arrived, his entire family was thrown into prison, nearly going to meet their ancestors. But luckily, in his past life, he was a criminal police officer. Thanks to his phenomenal case-solving abilities and superhuman IQ, he managed to save his family for the time being, and eventually, an entire era. It must be said that in this world, the people he interacted with were also very minded, insanely minded. He was not only good at solving cases, but also at flirting with girls, drawing, and writing poetry. Notably, this is a world with a diverse cultivation system and layers upon layers of dark conspiracies waiting for everyone to uncover. Anyway, let's not beat around the bush anymore. Let's start the story with me. A rotten smell wafted into our main character's nose at this moment. He thought the dog in the house must have pooped on the bed again and was even about to give him a piece, preparing him to get a 3-foot bag to carry it away. He hurriedly woke up, reaching out his hand to stop it, but what a surprise, my friend. His hands were shackled, and his body was even in a great prison. He was like, "Where's this? Who am I?" He remembered yesterday. He was at a bar partying with his bros, drinking so much that his bro went to jail while he went to meet his ancestors. Suddenly, his head throbbed with intense pain, and then the memories of this body's former owner flooded his brain. The young man is Su Qian, courtesy naming Yin. His father died in the Shanghai campaign 19 years ago, and his mother also passed away from illness as a result. He was raised by his second uncle from childhood to adulthood. Only then did the main character realize he had transmigrated, and heaven showed no pity and the author offered no grace, letting him transmigrate into this body. He practiced martial arts all year round, reaching the peak of the refining realm by 18, but had been stuck there ever since. He had to rely on his second uncle's connections to become a bailiff at the Chongluo County Yamen, under the jurisdiction of the Jingzhou Prefecture. Su Qian was bored to death to find out he was a bailiff. Even after transmigrating, he still had to do his old job as a police officer. But a few days ago, his second uncle, a 7th-rank imperial sword guard named Su Pingji, was escorting a batch of tax silver to the Ministry of Revenue, but lost 150,000 taels of tax silver on the way. Therefore, the Holy Emperor flew into a rage and personally ordered Su Pingji to be beheaded in 5 days, the male members of 3 generations of the clan to be exiled to the borderlands, and the female relatives to be sent to the Jiaofeng Sea, which was a hell for women. As Su Pingji's biological nephew, Su Qian was demoted and thrown into the Jingzhou Prefecture's great prison. Our main character had now gone from a mild state of collapse to being completely beyond saving, because there were only 2 days left until he would be exiled to the borderlands. One must know that this world is under the rule of a feudal dynasty with no human rights. The borderlands are desolate places with harsh climates. Most prisoners exiled there do not live for more than 10 years. Moreover, many people never even reach the borderlands, bidding a final farewell and resting in the underworld due to various accidents or illnesses. After realizing how incredibly dangerous the outside was, Su Qian couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, shouting loudly for the system, hoping it would answer, but it didn't appear. Su Qian was desperate again. Without a system, he could only think of a way to save himself. He thought about breaking out of prison, but looking at himself, he was only at the peak of the refining realm. It sounded impressive, but he was only stronger than ordinary people. A prison break was a no-go. Relying on his clan and friends was even more impossible because the Su family was not a major clan, and its members were scattered. And with the entire 150,000 taels of tax silver stolen, who would dare to interfere in this matter? Wait, stop. Su Qian suddenly remembered that the laws of Defeng allowed for redeeming guilt with merit. Therefore, his spirits lifted again. He could find the silver to avoid the death penalty. Very quickly, he felt faint again because he was in the great prison and had no detailed case file. Truly, even if he screamed his lungs out, no one would respond. Just then, someone approached. The person stopped in front of Su Qian's cell and then thanked the guard. After the young man saw the guard leave, he turned back. This was Su Xinyan, courtesy named Sijio, the biological son of the second Uncle Su Pingji, and also the main character's younger cousin. He was a newly promoted Jiren of Defeng, studying at the Yunlu Academy, a king-level trash talker. Seeing his younger cousin arrive, Su Qian dusted off his butt and stood up to listen to what his cousin had to say. "The soldiers escorting you to the borderlands have taken 300 taels from me. This is all the silver our family has left. You can go with peace of mind. Nothing unexpected will happen on the road." Su Qian knew that the relationship between this cousin and the former owner of the body was not good, but he still cared about what would happen to the other party. The young man replied very stubbornly that his official status had been revoked, but he was protected by the academy's teachers, so he didn't have to go into exile. Then, with a cold face, he told Su Qian to take care of himself. himself. Once you get to the borderlands, you have to rein in your temper. Maybe you'll live for a year or so. Su Qian silently observed Su Xinyan's expression and could tell that the other party had probably suffered more than just having his official status revoked. He was also entered into the criminal records, and his descendants would not be allowed to take the imperial examinations. Moreover, in 2 days, the female relatives of the Su family would be sent to the Jiaofeng Sea to endure humiliation. As a scholar, how could Su Xinyan have the face to continue living in the capital? Seeing that dazed look in his eyes suddenly startled Su Qian, who reacted sharply and asked, "Are you planning to commit suicide?" Hearing this, Su Xinyan was also extremely surprised and looked back at Su Qian's serious expression. He decided he didn't want to drag things out anymore, but before leaving, he turned back and said a sentence to Su Qian, "Keep living." It was clear the other party wanted to return to the capital, but Su Qian wanted to return his innocence. He suddenly grabbed Su Xinyan's hand and very seriously told him to get the case file of the missing tax silver. The young man was like, "Men should not be so intimate," and pulled his hand away. Su Qian was now racking his brain trying to solve the case, but he was afraid that saying so would make him seem brain dead. So this guy gave an awkward, stiff smile and explained that he didn't want to die as an ignorant ghost. If he had to die, he had to die knowing why. Su Xinyan was about to tell him orally, but this guy was stubborn. He wanted to know all the details of the case. Su Xinyan's brain processed for a few seconds. Then he said okay and left. Only then did Su Qian breathe a sigh of relief. He recalled that modern criminal investigation methods consist of crime scene investigation, cameraman, and autopsy as 3 essential parts. But in the case of the missing tax silver, no one died, and there were no cameras in ancient times. On top of the bad luck, there was more misfortune as he was in prison. The case file might be able to reconstruct the crime scene to a certain extent. Whether he ended up in heaven or disaster next could only be entrusted to the author. A while later in the prison, Su Xinyan entered again, stealthily handing Su Qian the file he had just written out. Seeing the guy sitting there staring blankly, the young man seemed to have something on his mind, but couldn't bring himself to say it. He just told Su Qian to take care and left without a word of farewell. After glancing at the paper, Su Qian felt that there is only one truth, and being literate is useful. If the previous owner had been illiterate, he wouldn't have been able to recognize these scribbled words. It roughly stated that 3 days ago, at 6:30 in the morning, Imperial sword guard Su Pingji was escorting a batch of tax silver into the capital. At a quarter past the hour of Chun, the convoy arrived at Guangnan Street. Just after crossing a bridge, a strange wind suddenly blew. The horses were frightened and plunged into the river beside the street. A moment later, a deafening explosion was heard. The river water rose up to 6 zhang high, with turbid waves filling the sky. Soldiers jumped into the river to search for the silver, but only recovered 1,250 taels of silver. The rest of the silver vanished into thin air. Reading this, Su Qian felt endlessly depressed. Scene changed to the back hall of the Jingzhou prefecture, where 3 people were sitting. One of them coughed a few times, letting the camera zoom in on his old, wrinkled face. This is the Jingzhou prefect, Chun Hongguang. The old man reminded the others that the Holy Emperor had ordered them to find the stolen tax silver before Su Pingji's execution. Now, there were only 2 days left, with the deadline breathing down their necks. He urged the other 2 to hurry up. One of them, a Dagung Rin who worked for the Royal Intelligence Organization, named Li Yuqin, asked if there was any progress on Su Pingji's side, but Hongguang replied, absolutely nothing. The brute only knew how to use his fists and proclaim his innocence, not even knowing how the tax silver was lost, which was just surreal. The other person also spoke up, saying she had used the qi gazing technique to check. Su Pingji was not lying. This petite and lovely girl was the youngest disciple of the director of the Tianjian, named Chu Kaiwei. Hearing this, the 2 men were 30% helpless and 70% like whatever. Even though the Tianjian's qi-gazing technique had cleared Su Pingji of suspicion, with the tax silver missing, the death penalty was hard to avoid. At this time, Chu Kaiwei was still munching away enthusiastically when Li Yuqin noticed a crumb falling. Just as he was panicking, he breathed a sigh of relief because it didn't hit the ground. But damn it bounced and fell out again. He quickly made a move to return the crumb. The 3-second rule should still be valid. Just then, a servant rushed in and handed Chu Kaiwei a letter from the Tianjian and also some steam buns. The girl opened it and read the message. Their people had not detected any demonic aura in the river for 20 miles along the road. There were also no traces of demonic aura on the bank. Hearing this, the hot-tempered Hongguang slammed the table loudly. Where could 150,000 taels of silver be taken? It had to come ashore. Silver isn't a person. It's been 3 days, and we haven't even found a trace of the culprit. If we can't find the tax silver, who will bear this responsibility? We're Or should I just carry my mother? Li Yuchen thought, maybe our investigation direction is wrong. Maybe it wasn't done by a demon. Han Guang didn't believe such a surreal thing. If it wasn't a demon, then how did the demonic wind appear? At the same time, Su Qian had been sitting until he got hemorrhoids, and suddenly wondered with a start, how could it raise water waves several zhang high, causing the banks to shake and crack? In this world, there are demons. The demon race has existed since ancient times, hunting and devouring each other and humans. In the 10,000 great mountains of the southern border, there's a place where a large number of demons gather, called the 10,000 Demon Nation. 500 years ago, the Western nations, under the guidance of the Buddhist sect, declared war on the 10,000 Demon Nation in the southern border. The war lasted for 60 years, finally raising the 10,000 Demon Nation. In the history books, this campaign is called the Jiazi Demon Purge. From then on, the fate of the demon race was damaged, leading to its decline. The Buddhist sect, on the other hand, rose to the heavens in one fell swoop, and Buddhism flourished. The group was still having a major headache over the reason why a demon would steal the tax silver. Chu Kai-wei, with her grape-sized head and nut-sized brain, also jumped on the bandwagon, her neurons firing. She felt that the demons were as stupid as dogs. Human flesh is clearly tastier, so what do they need silver for? The thought of human flesh scared the girl. Never mind, she'd just keep eating her meat bun to calm her fears. After licking it clean, Chu Tsaiwei's IQ seemed to have increased, and she spoke with clarity. Silver, in the eyes of a demon, is not necessarily as attractive as a living person. Even if they wanted silver, stealing or robbing would be safer than directly robbing the tax silver in the capital of Defone. Considering this reason, the possibility of being instructed by someone else cannot be ruled out, but who and for what reason, no one knows. Suddenly, Han Guang figured out, thinking that the person behind it needed a very large sum of money, but couldn't amass wealth overtly. So they targeted the tax silver. But the escort route for the tax silver is random, harder to predict than picking lottery numbers. So how could a demon ambush them under the river beforehand? Therefore, Li Yuchen thought it was very likely that there was an inside man in the escort team. He then ordered someone to go to the Yunlu Academy to find a Confucian sage for a heart questioning. Chu Kai-wei felt as if her Si Tian Jin's qi-gazing technique was being looked down upon and showed her displeasure. On her face, the two old men quickly switched to airplane mode. Floating with their brothers, Chu Kai-wei silently cursed. Brutes are indeed crude. She wanted to clean up this mess and leave the Jingzhou prefecture before sunset. Then she would go to the palace to find the eldest princess, also because the skills of the chefs in the imperial palace were top-notch. At this time, Han Guang felt that the case was progressing slowly and the deadline was near. So he suggested to Li Yuchen that they go and consult Wei Gong. Li Yuchen's face darkened, and he retorted sarcastically, "You civil officials have your Jingcha. We the Gungren also have ours. This is a test that Wei Gong has given me." Han Guang felt helpless now. The entire court and the common people were watching them. The pressure was doubled. At the same time, in the prison, Su Qian's eyes were dull. He had once thought of transmigrating to ancient times, pretending to be a poet, and taking the opportunity to pick up girls. But life is like life. Even after transmigrating, he was unexpectedly outclassed by the reality of life. If it was a demon causing trouble, then he was beyond saving. Su Qian tried to regain his composure. After all, that was just the Jingzhou prefecture speculation. There was still a chance. He asked himself why a demon would want to rob the tax silver. Isn't human flesh more fragrant? Even if they were short on cash, they didn't need to target the tax silver. Thinking about it, the young man's blood boiled again as he remembered what was said in the books. The demonesses of the demon race are all very charming, with seductive figures and fair skin. The young man quickly slapped himself awake and started reasoning from the beginning again. The tax silver case has two of the most obvious clues. One is the demonic wind. Apart from brutes, the major cultivation systems all have the ability to create a demonic wind. Therefore, the demonic wind can only explain that there was the involvement of a cultivator. The second uncle, being a brute, had his suspicion reduced, but the possibility that he conspired with others couldn't be ruled out. Two is the explosion. In high-level cultivator battles, explosions are as common as a pound of sugar in a can of milk. But in this case, there was no physical combat, so the appearance of an explosion is unreasonable unless it was impossible for it not to explode. Thinking along this line, Su Qian pondered which profession among the major cultivation systems in this world needed to rely on explosions to achieve its goal. Suddenly, that's not right. He realized that he and the Jingzhou prefecture had made the same mistake. That is, making judgments based only on the most obvious clues in the case. He then changed his line of thinking. Assuming this was a carefully planned man-made incident, the loophole might not be in the most obvious clue, but in the various other traces. Suddenly, Su Qian figured it out, laughed out loud, and called for someone to come quickly. The guard was very dissatisfied with this guy, who seemed crazy and deranged. Su Qian still acted like a boss, telling the man to inform the prefect that he had an important clue in the tax silver case. At this moment, the two old men were preparing to go and inquire with Wei Gong. Chu Kai-wei chimed in sarcastically from the side. With our Feng's great national player taking action, you two don't need to worry about being blamed by His Majesty anymore. An innocent face, but words with immense damage. She continued to rub salt in the wound, but the demerit in Wei Gong's heart is much more serious than being blamed by His Majesty. After hearing this, Li Yuchen was speechless. Just then, a servant reported to the prefect that Su Pingji's nephew, Su Qian, claimed to have an important clue in the tax silver case, shocking them. Han Guang immediately ordered the man to be brought over. Then, Su Qian, in chains, entered. His eyes, full of killing intent, observed the two old men, until he saw the young girl, and his eyes lit up like stars. He thought to himself, holy crap, there's such a beautiful girl. I wonder if she's married yet. This guy probably already thought of a name for their child. A real man looks at the chest first, but with a plane as flat as that, his lower head. Also behaved, letting his upper head think. As soon as Han Guang saw Su Qian, he questioned why the nephew said he knew nothing when he first entered prison and threatened the kid for the crime of concealing information. Su Qian recognized this cunning old man at a glance. In his heart, he was already worried sick, but his mouth was still firm, not asking for clues. But anyway, this time he had to succeed. So he told them about Su Xinyan giving him the file earlier and how he had deduced the truth of the case from the file. Both old men heard this with expressions of disbelief. But there is only one truth. The tax silver case was not done by a demon at all, but by a person. Hearing that, Han Guang got so angry he lost it. If you're gonna be crazy, you'll get 200 strokes of the cane. Su Qian's face went blank as he pointed to himself and asked, me? Han Guang thought Su Qian was half crazy and not in his right mind. That a demon stole the tax silver was almost a settled conclusion among the officials. Talking such nonsense, he should go straight back to prison. Su Qian didn't expect that his own line of thinking wouldn't succeed, but was about to succeed my ass. Suddenly, stop. Li Yuchen stopped him, letting Su Qian speak. He said, according to the testimony of the guards at the city gate, at 2/4 past the hour of Mao, your second uncle entered the city. At 1/4 past the hour of Chun, the tax silver escort team arrived at Guangnan Street. At this time, a strange wind arose, causing the horses to panic and plunge into the river. That is also the reason why Han Guang concluded that a demon was hiding in the river and stole the tax silver. But no, Su Qian realized that the demonic wind and the explosion were just a smokescreen. In fact, it was to make them overlook a fatal flaw. The three of them jumped in surprise and asked what flaw it was. Su Qian began to turn the tables, questioning them back. How much does 150,000 taels of silver weigh? This question made the old men ashamed, not knowing the answer. Su Qian held his forehead, feeling helpless with these stupid-as-hell guys, and said it was 9,375 jin. Chu Kai-wei asked again, what does this prove? Su Qian was so damn salty, silently cursing. It proves that you little sister are not very smart. On the contrary, Li Yuchen seemed to have thought of something. Su Qian continued to grill this old man. How far is the route from the city gate to Guangnan Street? It's 30 li. On the way, it passes through how many bustling streets? 4. What is the pace of a horse? At this point, Li Yuchen was startled, realizing the key point was that the time was wrong. Guangnan Street is 30 li from the south gate, with the strength of a horse's legs, having to pass through 4 streets along the way. Entering the city at 2/4 past the hour of Mao, it's impossible to reach Guangnan Street by 1/4 past the hour of Chun. But the tax silver was indeed escorted to Guangnan Street at the hour of Chun. At that time, many commoners witnessed the horses plunging into the river, so it's hard to fake. Therefore, there's only one possibility. What was being escorted was not silver at all. At this point, Han Guang couldn't help but slam the table and shout absurd. Even if we don't talk about whether the escorting soldiers saw it with their own eyes, the file records the confessions of the commoners at the scene. At that time, when the horses plunged into the river, glistening silver fell into the water. Su Qian then advised the old man to take a chill pill to cool down. Then he asked the old man to lend him a brush and paper for a moment. After fiddling and scribbling for a while, he was done. He earnestly requested the old official to prepare the items on the paper according to his request. Han Guang looked and was surprised, not because of what was written, but because the guy's handwriting was so ugly it insulted the reader. Damn. Chu Kai-wei also curiously took it to read, then was disappointed, thinking it was something special. It was just ordinary things written by an ordinary person. Li Yuchen, on the side, his eyes reddened, urged Chu Kai-wei to give it to him quickly. When he saw the crumpled paper, he smoothed it out. It turned out this old man had high-level OCD and couldn't stand a bit of mess in his sight. Then Han Guang took out the things Su Qian had asked him to. Prepare, which included water, iron wire, a porcelain cup, a bamboo toothpick, salt, a candle, and Xian paper. At this time, Su Qian proposed a deal to Han Guang. If he helped solve this case, the old man must submit a letter to His Majesty to grant amnesty to the Sue family. Han Guang agreed, because according to the laws of Defeng, redeeming guilt with merit could naturally grant amnesty. With that, Su Qian said okay and began. Su Qian wasn't sure if the tax silver explosion was caused by it, but it didn't matter. What was important was to enlighten these people with a new line of thought, and what he had to do now was very simple. It was just high school chemistry, the metal refining method. It's really simple for chemistry majors, but for those who are bad at it, forget it. Step 1. Dissolve salt in water. Step 2. Cover the cup's mouth with Xian paper and slowly pour the salt water in. Step 3. After filtering, heat the porcelain cup over a flame. Step 4. Stir continuously with a bamboo toothpick until the salt water evaporates and dries up. The cumbersome and complex process made the three of them watch with wide eyes. After those 4 steps, the sodium chloride precipitate was complete, but the next part was the hardest: electricity and the melting point of sodium chloride. In this ancient era, these two things were fundamentally impossible to achieve, but in this world, there's a profession that can do it. He panned the camera to Chu Kai-wei, a 6th-rank alchemist of the Si Tianjian. An alchemist, that Bagua-looking toy, besides the disciples of the Si Tianjian, no one else knows how to use it, so it's unmistakable. Chu Kai-wei acted very smugly at this moment, bringing up her master, the director of the Si Tianjian. She was the direct disciple of the director. Su Qian then pretended to be sincere and invited, "Big sister, please help me melt these crystals." Although controlling fire is an ability that only alchemists have, and she was only a 7th-rank feng shui master, she was a VIP player using premium items, gifted a magical artifact by her master. Chu Kai-wei lightly tapped the magical artifact, immediately summoning free fire, and aimed it at the bowl, shooting it out. Immediately, Su Qian dropped the steel into the bowl and said, "Turn on the electricity on the lightning technique." Then he told her to control the voltage well, as this was a very difficult step that might fail many times. Chu Kai-wei immediately executed the lightning technique, shooting it at the bowl until Su Qian shouted stop. The bowl emitted smoke, indicating the precipitation was complete. The sodium chloride precipitation was successful. The equation, 2 NaCl electrolyzes into 2 Na and 1 Cl. Su Qian also didn't think his luck would be so good, but the voltage was just right, and it succeeded on the first try. He was very pleased with himself and told them to come and see. This thing is much lighter than silver, but its appearance is extremely similar. It's possible that someone knew how to use this to swap the real thing with a fake, passing it off as silver. Han Guang held it. It was indeed much lighter than silver, and he also felt that if this was what was being transported that day, it would be perfectly logical. Chu Kai-wei also picked it up to examine it. This thing's appearance was indeed very similar to silver, looking even more real than real silver. She asked if Su Qian was also an alchemist. Of course not. He just knew chemistry, so he could only give an awkward, stiff laugh. Haha. Han Guang started shaking his head again, denying it. Even if the silver was swapped like this, what about the explosion? If there wasn't a demon hiding in the river, how could the fake silver explode when it fell into the water? Su Qian had no choice but to take back the lump of sodium and drop it into the water to prove it. When the sodium dissolved in the water, the bowl of water exploded with a bang, making it hard for Han Guang to believe. Su Qian began to explain that this fake silver explodes when it meets water. This can explain why an explosion occurred after the silver fell into the water. Based on what Su Qian just said, Li Yuchen also realized that they had been deceived from the very beginning, spun around like Nobi's bamboo copter. The mastermind behind it used the explosion and the demonic wind to make them mistakenly think it was a demon's work, shifting the focus of the investigation to tracking and capturing demons. Also explained why the Si Tianjian's Qi observation technique couldn't detect the demon. Chu Kai-wei puffed up with indignation, affirming the credibility of her Si Tianjian's Qi observation technique. Qian, at this point, became more and more animated, asserting that after the tax, silver fell into the water. The soldiers only recovered over 1,000 taels of silver, and it was possible this silver was spread on the top layer to deceive everyone. What Qian said unexpectedly matched all the suspicious points, which surprised Li Yuchen. He was about to praise him with a few words, but then he saw his clothes. He couldn't stand how wrinkled they were, so he deliberately patted his shoulder to comfort him, but his main intention was to straighten his clothes. When his shoulder was patted, Qian's eyes lit up like stars, not expecting such praise from the great lord before him, unaware that this old man had terminal stage OCD. At this time, Han Sheng knew the silver was fake and wanted to know where the rest of it was hidden, but the tax silver had left the treasury and passed through many hands on its way to the capital. The difficulty of finding the silver was no different from finding a needle in a haystack, and this matter was beyond their jurisdiction. They could only report it to His Majesty. However, the tax silver was escorted all the way to the capital, passing through so many hands. If it were fake, it should have been discovered earlier. Therefore, Li Yuchen proposed a possibility. It was only swapped recently. Hearing this, Han Sheng's face turned as pale as a frog's ass. He immediately called for a sedan to go out right away, and always. Just then, Qian reminded the old man from behind that a man must keep his word, not bark like a dog, and then Stop. He was now like a helpless husband, only hoping the tax silver could be found before he was exiled. Otherwise, even if it were found, it wouldn't change the Su family's fate. What if the old man Han Sheng's heart turned cold and he wanted to take all the credit? That would be a disaster. Suddenly, Chu Kaiwei curiously asked Qian how salt could be turned into silver. She suddenly remembered and took out a crab mallet from her small bag, making Qian think it was Doraemon's magic pocket. It turned out Chu Kaiwei took it out to give him to eat, as if bribing him. He started bullshitting that he had seen alchemy turning salt into silver in an ancient book. Chu Kaiwei then asked where that ancient book was and who the author was. Qian probably only remembered black books and hentai. How would he know the author of a high school chemistry book was probably the People's Education Press? He glibly claimed the ancient book was destroyed, but that he still remembered the contents inside, all while putting on a pitiful act, saying disaster was imminent and he was in no mood to chat. Chu Kaiwei looked naive, but was very sharp, knowing he was being cunning and wanted to ask her family for help. She immediately said that her Si Tianjin does not interfere in court politics, meaning how to deal with him was up to His Majesty to decide. However, Qian was still persistently clinging to the matter, even wanting to sell himself as a disciple of the Si Tianjin, relying on the grand astrologer status in court. Taking in a criminal would be no problem. Chu Kaiwei didn't believe him. Why would a martial artist want to become a sorcerer? Of course, it was to leech off a win, but he still spouted nonsense about admiring the grand astrologer. Chu Kaiwei knew immediately he was talking nonsense and flew into a rage. Then she asked him about the contents of that alchemy book. Qian thought the content was a bit too mystical for Chu Kaiwei's intelligence, which was approaching the x-axis, so how could she possibly understand? But she was still smug, priding herself on being a genius in alchemy. So that fellow Qian took a deep breath and rattled off a burst of gibberish. Things like oxygen has a valence of 2, calcium, zinc, magnesium, copper, and mercury. Remember it well. Iron 2-3, carbon 2-4. A bunch of confusing chemical formulas with 0 damage, but infinite power against those who are bad at chemistry. What to say of Chu Kaiwei, who only knows how to eat and had no idea what the hell he was talking about. She got so angry, thinking she was being pranked, and grumpily demanded her give back. Before leaving, she cast a sharp glance and said, "Our Si Tianjin only accepts disciples who are virgins," then left. His sight. Qian really wanted to say that he was also a virgin and didn't need a virginity restoration pill, but the reality was he still had to get his ass back to the dungeon. Time flew by, and it was now 2 days later at the Great Prison. A few guards came to where Su Pingji was locked up and called out. He thought the 5-day limit was up. Opposite him, his wife was extremely agitated, swearing she would rather die than enter a devilish place like the Jiaofeng Sea. Su Pingji felt extremely guilty towards his wife, son, and his nephew. He swore that in the next life, he would be an ox or a horse to repay his debt to his wife. He just didn't expect that after a lifetime of patriotism and loyalty to the emperor, his whole family would be. As he was getting too deep into the script, someone interrupted, telling the old man to come out. After signing, he could leave. Su Pingji hurriedly checked if his Bluetooth earpiece was malfunctioning, and he had misheard, quickly asking what they meant. He only saw the person being very considerate, calling him Lord Su and even handing him his official robes. His face was dumbfounded. His wife thought their son Xinyan must have been running around like a dog these past few days to arrange things for them, so the court was showing leniency. The more she spoke, the more she thought it was likely Xinyan's teacher who did it, the vice minister of the Ministry of Justice from the 18th year of Yuanjing. Su Pingji heard this and felt something was wrong. That was the 18th year, and it's been over 20 years now. And it was even more wrong. Logically, even if the death penalty was waived, his official position couldn't possibly be restored. He wanted to know exactly why the court had pardoned him. The person explained that the case was solved and the tax silver was recovered, okay? The laws of the Great Feng stipulate that if an elder in the family violates the law, the succeeding son can perform meritorious deeds to atone for the father's crime. Hearing that, the wife was even more certain it was her precious son who did it. The couple chatted emotionally. Old master, Nyenner helped the court recover the tax silver. I can't believe Nyenner recovered the tax silver that was stolen by the demon. I told you our son Xinyan is a talented person. The wife remembered how her husband didn't let their son practice martial arts years ago, but let that kid Su Qian practice, and she was still bitter. The husband, seemingly afraid of this lioness, said that her son had no talent for martial arts. A soldier interrupted them, saying the one who solved the case was their nephew, Su Qian. Hearing this, they felt like they had been slapped so hard they spat blood. The person added that he had helped the prefectural magistrate solve the tax silver case. He had just left and might be waiting for them at the back door. At this moment, the two were filled with 100 mixed emotions. The man was stunned, while the wife was trembling with fear, unable to believe that the one who saved the whole family was that Sukuna-like nephew. He was clearly also in the great prison, but managed to save the whole family. Just thinking about it made her so scared she fainted. At the back door of the capital's prefecture, Su Qian had been waiting for a long time. He waited until he was impatient, but still didn't see his second uncle's family come out. Just then, the family of four came out. The youngest sister innocently asked when they were going to Guiwa Tower to eat. The question made the mother choke up, not knowing how to trick her child to get past the topic. Su Pingji then saw his nephew waving at him. Seeing his beloved nephew like that, he thought he would be moved, but it turned out to be a cold shock. He just patted him lightly in encouragement. "You truly are my nephew," which made the young man cough up blood. This old man was at the peak of the Qi refining realm, a whole grade higher than Qian. He could only take the hit. The difference between the grades of the martial artist system was too great. Just one palm strike from his second uncle almost made him only able to come home on the 1st and 15th of each month. Just then, the fellow's eyes met. Hers. The young man saw Su Lingyue, the daughter of his second uncle and aunt, and also his cousin. He didn't expect to have the benefit of such an elegant and otherworldly sister. Everyone, don't underestimate her. Just wait and see her future. This fellow was so surprised because, in the original owner's memory, his sister's appearance was very vague, probably because he never cared. Moreover, because of his aunt, he took his anger out on the wrong people and wasn't very friendly with his male and female cousins. Either. Su Lingyue, being stared at by her big brother, also became shy and timid. Just then, the little sister was short. Legs ran over, calling Big Hua. Qian looked down and remembered there was an exception. This little girl, Su Lingyin. The original owner disliked his male and female cousins, but wasn't bad to this youngest cousin, because the youngest sister's appearance wasn't inherited from her mother. The little girl ran over and asked him for food, but he said, "I have no candy for you. I just got out of prison too." "What's prison?" "It's the place where you slept for the past few days." The little girl's brain seemed to be hanging on a tree. She asked, "Where's the other Wawa? Did he bring him?" Qian felt helpless. That was her biological brother, yet she called him Wawa, but he still answered that he didn't come. The child was disappointed. Looking at her, you could tell she wasn't very smart, a foolish child. Qian felt this trait must have been inherited from her mother, at least the original owner. Thought so. His aunt's name is Li Ru, 35 this year, second uncle's wife, and also Qian's aunt. This aunt had to swallow all her pride to say words of thanks to this nephew. But Qian and his aunt had endless grudges. Before, he was hated by his aunt because his martial arts training cost the family over 100 taels of silver each year. Even more infuriating, she acted as a chemical catalyst for him to get beaten up. The original owner was also extremely bitter, moved out, and swore to become successful in the future to make his aunt regret it. Reviewing this memory made Qian die of embarrassment. Isn't this the aunt's version of bullying the poor young man? These days, this melodramatic plot is everywhere. The aunt and nephew had just exchanged a few polite words and were about to start a verbal fight when Su Pingji stepped in to stop it. At the Su residence, Su Xinyin was furious and kicked open the door to his house. Inside was completely empty. The young man had just entered the house when he jumped like a startled mouse, as if having done something wrong, and ran to close the door. The young man now felt more ashamed than after. A breakup. Just think about it. His life. Learned to read at 3, recited poetry at 5, memorized the Sage's classics by 10, and became a Jiren at Yunlu Academy at 18. Thinking this, the young man narcissistically thought he was truly gifted. But as a man, he would rather die a glorious death than live in humiliation. He took a gulp of wine to steel his nerves and smashed the cup. What a hot-tempered guy. A brief overview of this world's cultivation system. From low to high, it's from the 9th grade to the 1st grade, then the transcendent grade. It includes the martial artist system from 9th grade to 1st grade, with corresponding realm names. Spirit Refinement, Su Qian's current realm. Qi Refining, Su Pingji's realm. Spirit Refining, Bronze Skin and Iron Bones. Transformation Realm, Intent Realm, Indestructible Body, Dao Fusion. 1st grade martial artist and transcendent grade is called Martial God. Next is the Confucian system, also similar, respectively. Aperture Opening, Su Xinyin's current cultivation. Imprisoning God, Benevolent One, Confucian Scholar, Virtuous Gentleman, Destiny Establishment, Great Confucian, Sub-Saint, and the Transcendent grade is Confucian Saint. The Sorcerer system, respectively. Healer, Qi Observer, Feng Shui Master, also Chu Tsaiwei's current cultivation. Next is Alchemist, Prophet, Formation Master, Heavenly Secrets Master, Qi Refiner, and Heaven's Mandate. In the capital of Great Feng, known as the #1 city under heaven. In the early years of Yuanjing, the capital's population was over 1.96 million people. Now is the 36th year of Yuanjing. The capital's population should have exceeded 2 million people. The price of a house in the capital, like the Su family's courtyard in the suburbs, would cost at least 5,000 taels of silver. Su Qian thought that if he put down a 30% deposit, it would be 1,500 taels of silver. The young man was now thinking about where to live next. Truly, he had lived 2 lives, but in both lives, he was a poor bastard. His uncle and aunt were still worried about how their son was doing. They remembered he said he would definitely save them. The uncle comforted his wife not to worry. He had great faith in his son who had read many sage books. He was a calm person with 100% reliability. But after hearing this, Qian was startled and remembered that the young man wanted to commit suicide earlier. This time it's a real mess. At the same time, Su Xinyan was laughing like a madman. Haha, his mouth was like a loudspeaker, shouting loudly that I, Su Xinyan, live as a free and easy person and die as a resolute ghost. The family had just arrived when they heard the young man's nonsense. Qian felt even more guilty. At this point, Su Xinyan had more recklessness than brains, lamenting that heaven was unfair, that Su Xinyan is full of talent, but heaven is not fair. In his desperation, he let down his hair, which was smoother than sun silk, and left behind a joke for the ages. If heaven had not given birth to me, Su Xinyan, the great phone would be like a long, dark night. When he decisively decided to go, shouting a cold line, surprise, you reckless fool. The whole family happened to witness the scene of the young man preparing to hang himself. All of them were speechless, and the young man, Su Xinyan, never expected this situation. The young man shed bitter and sour tears because he had become a clown. Su Xinyan now felt he was one step too late in hanging himself. As for that other young man, surnamed Su, he was enjoying a soul-like laugh. To give a little background knowledge, the myriad cultivation systems in this world, besides martial artists, also include sorcerers, Confucians, Buddhists, Taoist shamans, and Gu masters. 600 years ago, when the Great Feng was founded, the first-generation Grand Astrologer of the Citian Jian divided the major systems into grades. Su Qian is a 9th grade spirit refinement realm martial artist. Second uncle is at the peak of the 8th grade Qi refining realm. 7th grade is the spirit refining realm, and after that, Su Qian got kicked out, so he doesn't know. On the contrary, Su Qian knew quite a bit about the sorcerer system of the Citian Jian, because the Citian Jian belongs only to the cultivation system of the Great Feng dynasty and is also very ostentatious. Among them, the inventions and creations of the 6th grade alchemists have been integrated into tens of thousands of households. For sorcerers, 9th grade is healer, 8th grade is Qi observer, 7th grade is Feng Shui master, 6th grade is alchemist, and after that, Su Qian doesn't know. As for the other systems, he doesn't understand a thing. Next to the Su residence, in Su Qian's room, he shook his head wearily. He had transmigrated to this world and only understood a little. But looking at this incredibly handsome face was some consolation. This fellow admitted that this avatar, although not comparable to his handsome, charming, and woman-loving self from his previous life, was acceptable. As for the original owner, he had no memory of him before he died or fell into a coma. As for himself in his previous life, after resigning from the police force, he chose to go into business, becoming a diligent and hardworking person. His future life could have handled a mortgage, paid for the bride price, married, and had children. As long as the neighbor wasn't a plumber, everything would have been fine. But he never expected that while celebrating with people at a bar, he drank too much, got alcohol poisoning, and logged out of the Earth server. He thought back and felt helpless about his carelessness. He had worked so hard to get a ticket to the middle class, only to be exiled to a feudal society in a flash. His luck was blacker than dog shit. He felt regret for his bank card, which had a lot of money he hadn't finished spending before he spent his life. He could only console himself that the money was left for his parents. In a national free fire tournament, if he had lived one more year, he would have become a legend. This fellow remembered the most important thing. The 120 gigabytes of study materials on his hard drive hadn't been deleted yet. If his parents found it, he would sink to the bottom of society, breathing the same air as Dat Villa. Just then, a figure lurked by his door. Someone was calling him, DeLang, come to the old master's place for dinner. The girl named Lu Yi, sold to the Su family at the age of 7 to serve the aunt. After the Su family's misfortune, the servants in the house were dismissed. She didn't expect that in just 5 days, the Su family would be back, still as terrible as before. That fellow had changed into much nicer clothes and told Lu Yi, let's go. He also reminded her not to call him DeLang, but Lu Yi insisted on calling him DeLang. Then, Lu Yi recounted to him how the old master and madam were arguing just now. The madam insisted on knowing how the tax silver was swapped, but the old master couldn't answer, so they argued back and forth. She asked if Qian knew. Qian understood. On the way back from the capital's prefecture, he had told his second uncle that the tax silver wasn't stolen, but swapped by someone. At that time, the aunt was silent, only to explode when she got home. There are 3 situations in life where young people are most embarrassed. When you're putting the squirrel in the jar and watching Animal Planet, and your parents catch you in the act. Second is when your comments about the teacher's figure are overheard. On the spot. Third is when you accidentally make your hentai story public. And now, there's a fourth, leaving a farewell letter, but failing to commit suicide. At this moment, at the dinner table, the little girl Ling Yin was chattering like a loudspeaker, deafening everyone. The aunt told Lu, need to take this one away immediately. Seeing this, Qian placed his hand on the little girl's head. The child, as if seeing his savior, immediately stopped crying and pointed a finger at her mother, accusing her of lying. She said if they could come back, she would take her to Guiwe Tower. Even her father had said so. The uncle looked like he really wanted to avoid the topic because Guiwe Tower is the top restaurant in the capital. The people who go in and out are all high-ranking officials. It doesn't welcome commoners and wealthy merchants. The special thing is that this foolish child can't even remember her brothers and sisters' names. Yet she can remember Gyewe Tower, which is truly magical. It's clear that this child is not stupid, but her talent is misplaced. Chien secretly praised this old Sue. He really knows how to let others take the blame for him. Even his own daughter became a tool. But this aunt really met her match. A casual remark now had her being pestered relentlessly by the little girl. Chien took the opportunity to mock his aunt. You even lie to a child. Truly unbelievable. At this time, Ling Nin clung to him like a monkey, wanting him to take her, but when he thought about Gyewe Tower, where one dish costs one tael, he also got scared and told Lu to take her away. Everyone ate sullenly. At this moment, under the table, the aunt nudged her husband's leg with her foot and gestured with her mouth, signaling for him to talk to Chien, but he felt the matter was too embarrassing. Well, difficult matters are for the son to handle. But the son was still so embarrassed, he wanted to dig a hole and hide. Finally, Chien felt uncomfortable and asked Ling why she kept looking at him sideways. Being asked, the girl's head spun like a top. Finally, she managed to ask how her big brother solved the case from the files. Taking the opportunity to show off, the young man spouted his confusing logic. There is no perfect crime in this world. Apart from coincidences, any man-made case will have clues that can be found. First, I found the problem with the tax silver through its escort route and the weight of the silver. Su Xinyan was extremely surprised to hear this. He praised, good job, but in his heart, he was incredibly jealous. As for Lingwe, she had to look at this big brother in a new light. The uncle also slammed the table, blaming himself for not thinking of it. The nephew and son thought, with that cabbage-like IQ, it would be strange if he did think of it. The aunt directly used words to strike deep into the old man's heart, liver, and lungs. A vulgar person like you doesn't even know how to estimate. Chien then asked him if they wore gloves when they inspected the silver. The uncle didn't think his nephew would know. Chien was even more annoyed. The old man was truly, the older the ginger, the spicier it gets. Yet, this detail was not in his testimony. The old man's ears itched upon hearing this. He scratched them a few times and said it was just a small matter, nothing worth mentioning, blaming it on that guy surnamed Lu who gave him wine to drink, so he didn't pay attention to other things. Looking at the old man's shameless face, Chien had to curse silently. What the hell? Having such a pig-like teammate is truly the most terrifying thing. If this point had been in the file, the truth could have been distinguished, saving so many brain cells. On one side, Su Xinyan heard that the guy, surnamed Lu, was very likely the one who framed his father. The whole family could only sigh in frustration, and the father suddenly realized and felt scared. He blamed himself for being muddle-headed and harming the whole family. When he looked at his nephew, he was reminded of his big brother back then. So he told Chien, that year, he and your father fought back-to-back in the Battle of Shanghai. They had clearly said they would survive together and get promoted together, but at that time, your father passed away and entrusted him to take care of his son. It must be said this world is vast. The Great Feng dynasty rules the Central Plains and is the orthodox lineage under heaven. The Great Feng was founded on martial prowess. It governs the country with Confucianism. At its peak, 10,000 nations came to pay tribute. It has existed for 600 years now. 20 years ago, the Great Feng allied with the countries of the western regions to crusade against the northern barbarians and the southern barbarians in the southwest. The decisive battle was at Shanhai Pass. The forces deployed by all sides reached 1 million. From the start to the end of the war, it only took half a year. 1 million lives were buried. It was one of the most brutal battles ever, known as the Shanhai Campaign. That year, the uncle's big brother took a blade for him. Otherwise, he would be the one pushing up daisies. Therefore, his decision to let Su Xinyan study and choose Chien to practice martial arts had a personal reason. The aunt became jealous again, saying, that's right, all your heart is on your own nephew. Chien, of course, took the opportunity to trade barbs with his aunt, provoking her. So Erlang is not your own flesh and blood. The aunt was extremely bitter. The uncle, who had been listening, felt like he was eating level 7 spicy noodles and roared. Enough. I barely managed to get my life back. Why do I have to listen to you all argue anymore? Afterwards, the matter was diverted when Lingyin ran back because she was hungry. As she was munching, she asked her mother why they were in a dark room every day and couldn't eat their fill. Hearing this, the uncle felt even more self-reproach, but the story wasn't over. Lingyin also said that she woke up that day and caught a bug on her head with an antenna. Isn't that a cockroach? The whole group's hair stood on end upon hearing this. The aunt felt guilty for being useless, but when asked further, the little girl calmly said she then stuffed it in her mother's mouth, and she ate it very quickly. The little girl's expression was like, hurry up and praise me, or I'll give you a good behavior slip. The aunt imagined the cockroach crawling into her mouth, and felt so disgusted she threw up a rainbow. The whole family now felt full and wanted to leave. At this time, in the Tianjin's stargazing tower. The 7th floor of the stargazing tower was the alchemy room, gathering many talented but reckless young people who would repay any kindness but also cause trouble for their parents. They were arguing loudly, one saying the amount of water was wrong, another saying the amount of salt was wrong. The group was crying out because this alchemy technique of turning Salt into silver was too difficult. Chu Kaiwei knew it was a lost cause and quietly slipped away from the group. It must be said that since the tax silver case was solved, His Majesty saw the immense power of fake silver, which was quite unique to the Great Phone. Therefore, he ordered the Ctianjian to produce fake silver. The alchemists of the Ctianjian had started working day and night, from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week, without reward. The exploitation was worse than capitalists. This group had failed repeatedly. One fellow with dark circles like a panda saw Chu Kaiwei and pointed her out to everyone. Seeing her, the whole group's eyes lit up like car headlights. Chu Kaiwei didn't have time to react and knew she was done for. So she was mobbed like an idol, the whole group clamoring, asking her how to make the fake silver, what the beginning and end were, and to tell them the middle part. But their refining process had no problems because at the beginning in the Sioux residence, Chu Kaiwei also made fake silver the same way. But then she tested it again and failed more than she succeeded, so she didn't know what the hell was going on. She gave a light GG and told her senior brothers to just be calm. Plop. Then, Chu Kaiwei repeated Su Qian's exact words for her senior brothers to hear, saying this was an alchemy art passed down from ancient times. It was mysterious and difficult to understand, not something one could learn just by wanting to. She acted all mysterious and passed on a mnemonic to her senior brothers. The whole group was extremely tense with anticipation. Then, Chu Kaiwei took a deep breath and began to unleash a long stream. Hydrogen, oxygen valence 2, calcium, iron, zinc, magnesium. Iron 2, carbon valence 2, she pulled out all this chemistry knowledge, causing the whole group to be dumbfounded. They hurriedly asked Kaiwei what the mnemonic meant. She didn't understand a damn thing and could only flash a confident smile in her awkward situation. In their hearts, besides being utterly confused, these guys were now convinced that the person who wrote this mnemonic was a true genius of alchemy. They thought their junior sister had met a grandmaster of alchemy who gave her pointers. Nice fantasy, guys. As it happened, Chu Kaiwei found someone to take the blame for this, and she also pulled out that person's profile. It was none other than Su Qian, nephew of Su Pingji, a 7th rank imperial guard. She told her senior brothers to just go find him. When the group heard he was a martial artist, they showed open contempt. Every single one of them thought that their Ctianjian had countless talents. Yet for refining counterfeit silver, they had to seek an outsider, and a martial artist at that. If word got out, they would become a circus, a society of clowns. The society of this world was normally like this. The Taoist sect and the Buddhist sect looked down on each other. Sorcerers looked down on shamans. Shamans looked down on Gu masters. And Gu masters looked down on sorcerers. Although it was more complicated than a love triangle, they all agreed on one thing. The third party was the martial artist, meaning they all looked down on those simple-minded, well-developed brutes. As for the Confucian school, there was no need to mention it. It was the system that could openly call the other systems trash. Unfortunately, extreme prosperity leads to decline, just as too much masturbation leads to kidney failure, so the modern Confucian school had already weakened. Returning to the matter, the thick-skinned senior brothers still begged their junior sister to teach them. Chu Kaiwei didn't know a damn thing and could only quickly leave this group of rabid fans. At the top of the tower was the Bagua platform, where an old man with white hair and a white beard sat, his entire being exuding an ethereal and otherworldly aura. This old man was Chu Tsaiwei's master, who never bothered with official business all day. He just liked to sit on the Bagua platform, drink wine, and enjoy the scenery, not wanting to be disturbed by anyone. Brothers, what looks like an immortal in the eyes of others is just a madman. He always told Chu Kaiwei that he was concentrating on observing the mortal world, which completely confused her. Just as she showed a disdainful expression for her old master, he called out her name, making her jump, thinking her master had heard her. Then, Chu Kaiwei plopped down and asked her master what the counterfeit silver really was. The old man also pretended not to know, which Chu Kaiwei found hard to believe, because was there anything in this world her master didn't know? But there were many things the supervisor didn't know, like where those thieves from 19 years ago went. Chu Kaiwei had heard her master talk about this constantly, but he never specified who they were or what they had stolen. Suddenly, the supervisor stood up and lamented that what was stolen could not be recovered. Chu Kaiwei then asked if her immortal master knew who refined the counterfeit silver. She knew that Ctianjian was the origin of all generations of sorcerers and alchemists in the world. Even if they didn't come from Ctianjian, they definitely had a connection to it. Behind the tax silver case, there must be an alchemist involved, and definitely not an ordinary one. Being asked this, the corner of the supervisor's mouth naturally lifted as he replied, "Of course, I know." The next morning at the Changle County Yamen, the whole crowd here was trembling like leaves, as if they had seen a ghost, and a few guys were so scared they pissed their pants. All eyes pointed at Su Qian, questioning if he was a man or a ghost. Scribely scowled and yelled at these guys to stop talking nonsense. Even if you're into the spiritual system, you're not in the neurotic system. Have you ever seen a ghost with a shadow? Truly as dumb as dogs. Su Qian found this amusing and put on a scary face that would even frighten a ghost, saying, could it be a soulless corpse? Scribely, who was so loud just a moment ago, was now playing the role of the head clown. He was so scared he started foaming at the mouth. That guy Qian saw was getting a bit over the top and said he was just joking. Greetings, Lord Scribe and fellow colleagues. I have been released from prison. Scribely then asked him what was going on. After hearing everything, everyone calmed down, coughing a few times to hide their embarrassment. At this moment, Qian gave Scribely the evidence from the capital prefecture to prove his own innocence. Scribely said okay, dismissed everyone, and left. The brothers then gathered around Qian, expecting him to pay for a treat. The one named head, Constable Wang, even whispered to him that a new batch had just arrived at the Guilin on Linshui Street, tempting him to go immediately. Qian was utterly petrified. Treating them to drinks was one thing, but they even invited themselves to sleep at the Guilin. Truly uninvited guests can only be those who like to be treated. He hurriedly waved his hands and quickly refused, saying his family was poor and his wallet was cleaner than his face. As he was backing away, he stepped on a silver ingot. It must be a gift from heaven. Suddenly, Scribely returned and called for Old Wang. The old county magistrate summoned them to the inner hall for a visit. Old Wang held his forehead in helplessness, and the mood of the people behind him plummeted to rock bottom. Qian, with his quick hands and sharp eyes, picked up the fallen item and pocketed it for the time being, then casually asked what had happened. It turned out that while he was in prison, a murder had occurred on Kongping Street. A wealthy merchant had logged off. The old county magistrate was furious, scolding head Constable Wang every day. Qian didn't know why the death of a single merchant would make the fifth-rank county magistrate so furious. So a brother explained, "Let me tell you, that merchant was related to a certain grand secretary. Moreover, this year is the year of Gungzi, which means it's time for the capital inspection. The capital inspection is a system in Defeng for evaluating officials once every 3 years. Officials who fail are demoted and can even be stripped of their rank and become commoners. This concerns one's future prospects, and the other party is a distant relative of a grand secretary. So if he is impeached, he'll have to pack his bags and join the retirement club." Head Constable Wang later returned to his room to rest. So pissed off he cursed, "Damn it, where to find a killer now that the person is dead? Might as well get a Google map to locate them." This old man was already poor and now unlucky, having just lost a tail of silver, unaware that some guy was smirking with delight. At this moment, Scribely came up with an extremely messed up idea. To touch a fish, not to put in the fridge, but touching a fish in the lowest rungs of officialdom means finding a scapegoat to take the fall. Head Constable Wang also had a massive headache. With no other choice, he ordered his men to go to the slums in the west of the city, find a few old vagrants or lawbreakers. At this moment, Qian appeared again, pushed Scribely aside, and said with righteous indignation, "We cannot let the culprit get away with it." His brothers hurriedly tried to stop this guy from meddling. But Head Constable Wang, having been scolded like a dog by a superior, was now madder than a dog. He angrily slammed the table and asked, "How will you investigate?" Qian, acting all cocky, broke free and held out his hand, saying, "Give me the case file." The file stated the victim's name was Zhang Yurue, 51 years old. He was from a wealthy family on Kongping Street, owned over 100 mu of land in the outskirts of Changle County, and had 3 shops in the capital selling silk, rouge, and other miscellaneous goods. His first wife died early, and he remarried a girl from a good family 20 years his junior. Besides the only son left by his first wife, Zhang Yurue had no other children. At this point, Qian didn't look like he was solving a case at all, but more like a gossiping bystander making snide remarks. 20 years younger. Could this be the legendary, "If you work hard enough to make money, your future wife will still be in kindergarten"? Back to the story. 4 days ago, Zhang Yurue returned to his hometown to collect rent. He arrived home during the ean hour, around 3 to 5 a.m. His wife, who was sleeping inside, suddenly heard a blood-curdling scream from outside. When the wife woke up and went out to check, she found Zhang Yurue dead in the courtyard and saw a black shadow climbing over the wall to escape. The Imperial Guard said that no suspicious characters appeared in the vicinity that night. To give a brief overview, the capital city has 3 walls: the palace city, the inner city, and the outer city. Although the outer city has soldiers patrolling at night, there is no curfew. The city gates are not closed for all 12 2-hour periods of the night. Merchants only need to prepare in advance and carry a permit to freely enter and exit the city gates. In this case, after the thief killed the person, he ignored the large box of money that the deceased had collected from rent. Qian immediately felt something was wrong. If he were the thief, he would observe the terrain first, so he would definitely choose to rob the next day, not today. After the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, which felt like an eternity to old Wang, the old man scowled and asked Su Qian, "Have you figured out who and where the killer is, kid?" Qian advised his boss not to be hasty. The file says there were footprints left outside the Zhang family's wall, right? Based on this, you deduced that the thief climbed the wall to escape, so what the woman said was correct. He raised a few issues. First, why were there footprints left behind? Old Wang angrily replied, "Because the soles of his Feet had mud on them. The young man continued to ask, why was there mud? Because there's a flower garden next to the wall. Then the problem is that the file doesn't mention any footprints entering the courtyard. Everyone speculated that it was possible the thief was careful when he entered and didn't leave any tracks. But after killing someone, he was in a hurry to escape and left footprints. Chien didn't rule out this possibility and asked again if there was a flower garden under the wall. Were there any footprints in the flower garden from when he snuck in? If the thief could jump over the wall and cross the flower garden without leaving a trace, with such Chien Gong, he wouldn't have needed to push off the wall for leverage when he fled. Second, the deceased was killed by a direct blow to the head with a blunt weapon, dying on the spot. But why a blunt weapon? If the killer used this method, wouldn't it have been easier to kill with a knife or sword? Scribely tried to cover. Maybe the thief didn't want to kill it first, but was immediately refuted by Old Wong that a blow to the head with a blunt weapon is a fatal strike, which means there was intent to kill. He was also stumped by this question. Chien then led him to the possibility that the killer didn't have a weapon handy at the time. The last point, and the one Chien paid the most attention to, was when the victim's family was brought to the yamen for questioning. That was Zhang Yangshi. After kneeling for a long time, she suddenly fainted. After the doctor's diagnosis, it was discovered that she was pregnant. The guys behind him started gossiping again, which annoyed Chien, who hated it when people gossiped while he was trying to enjoy the drama. Returning to the case, Zhang Yangshi was 20 years younger than the deceased. Having been married to the deceased for 10 years, why did she have to get pregnant at this specific time? If a man and a woman are healthy, it's impossible not to have a child in 10 years, unless they are intentionally avoiding it. One of them must have a physical problem, making it difficult to have an heir. Therefore, Chien said with a dangerous look, it's possible the child is not the deceased's. Hearing this, Old Wong was shocked and shouted, what? Speak clearly. Chien poured himself another cup of tea and with 100% confidence said, perhaps this isn't a robbery, but a murder. An illicit affair resulting in a pregnancy. Zhang Yangshi was cheating on her husband with her lover, who could be an outside man, or even the victim's own son. The two of them took advantage of the victim being out to collect rent to have a secret rendezvous. Who would have thought the victim would return early and catch them in the act while they were fooling around? A conflict broke out between the two sides, and the lover, in a fit of rage, grabbed a vase or another blunt object and killed the victim. Afterwards, Zhang Yangshi and her lover hurriedly cleaned up the scene, dragged the victim's body into the courtyard, and staged it to look like a thief broke into the house. For a robbery. If the lover wanted to have an affair, he would definitely have investigated beforehand. He would have figured out the patrol patterns of the night watch soldiers so as not to be discovered by the imperial guards. If a real thief wanted money, he absolutely would not have struck that night, but would have waited for the victim to exchange all the collected silver into silver notes, put it in his pocket, and take it away. The excuse Zhang Yangshi gave conveniently used. The rent collection to lead everyone's thoughts towards robbery. Chien's explanation was so coherent that it made everyone believe him completely. Head Constable Wong seemed to be pondering what he had just said and asked, why do you think the lover could be the victim's son? Chien replied, based on 2 points. First, the victim's son, Zhang Xian, said he was in his room looking at the account books that night. Zhang Yangshi was awakened by the loud scream, which proves the commotion was very loud. Yet a person who is awake like him, not hearing any commotion, is completely unreasonable. Second, if no traces of a thief were found in the flower garden when he broke into the house, then this thief most likely doesn't exist. Therefore, it can be inferred that the victim's son is highly suspicious. So, those footprints on the wall were very likely left intentionally to mislead the investigators. If we check the victim's son's boots, Head Constable Wong asserted, he definitely wouldn't leave his own footprints. Chien then flattered his boss. The boss is indeed brilliant to understand immediately. Truly the divine constable of Dephone. Head Constable Wong was so pleased with the compliment that his nose was in the air. So afterwards, the two people, the victim's wife and the victim's son, were brought to the public court. County Magistrate Zhou was the one handling this case. Although this man's professional ability was not high, as an official, his reputation was 100%. His good point was that he had a conscience, was not greedy, and though incompetent, he didn't trouble the people. His flaw was that he treated his subordinates poorly and was prone to making sarcastic remarks. As soon as the trial began, this old man made a show of power by immediately accusing the two below of murdering Zhang Yurue. Confess honestly. The young man Zhang Xian played dumb. Your Honor, why do you say that? How could this commoner kill his own father? This made County Magistrate Zhou's lungs explode with anger. Not long before, Head Constable Wong had run over to say he had a clue, but County Magistrate Zhou was all too familiar with the caliber of his staff. The moment old Wong arrived, he was cursed out, which is why he was crying so bitterly. County Magistrate Zhou knew that the person behind old Wong's reasoning was Su Qian, the one who solved the tax silver case. Back to the main matter, County Magistrate Zhou continued to question Zhang Xian about his whereabouts at the time of the incident. The guy immediately replied that he was in the study. Then County Magistrate Zhou asked why he wasn't with his wife and if he had any witnesses. Of course, the young man adamantly denied it and even argued, where would I find a witness in the middle of the night? Unable to pry open this guy's mouth, County Magistrate Zhou turned to question Zhang Yangshi. You and Zhang Yurue were married for 10 years with nothing. So why are you pregnant now? Did you conspire with your stepson to murder your husband? She cried that she was wronged, making County Magistrate Zhou's face darken. Feeling embarrassed, the old man slammed the table again. Can't you be a little gentler with the table? Then he continued to ask about her seeing the murderer climb the wall to escape. But why is it that when the constables inspected the flower garden under the wall today, they found no traces, not even signs of flowers and grass being trampled? She was questioned to the point of being speechless. So, Zhang Xian shouted on her behalf, "Your Honor, how would my mother know how the thief broke in a house? Just because your yamen can't solve the case, you can't frame my mother and me." Hearing this, Su Qian had to curse, "Mother and son, my ass. Don't insult those two words, okay?" County Magistrate Zhou was now furious and cursed the disrespectful brat, ordering the executioners to proceed. Zhang Xian was still stubborn, bringing up his uncle who held the post of Grand Secretary in the Ministry of Rights. If they tortured a confession out of him, he would report County Magistrate Zhou immediately. The minor post of Grand Secretary was a censor official who considered himself incorruptible, a mad dog who bit anyone he met, impeaching anyone he found displeasing. He shouldn't have said anything, but saying it just ignited County Magistrate Zhou's hot blood. "You dare to threaten me? Men, double the punishment." Qian felt this was not good. Even if Zhang Xian confessed, when the case was handed over to the Ministry of Justice, he could still use his connection with the Grand Secretary to overturn the verdict. At that time, he might even turn around and frame County Magistrate Zhou. He had to step forward and have someone pass a message to County Magistrate Zhou. The person who was called was puzzled. Why did this guy come over here? Qian then acted mysteriously and told the person to tell Old Master Zhou to take a short break, and the program would continue in a few minutes. He had a wonderful idea. Inside the yamen, in a holding cell, Zhang Yangshi was locked up, scared out of her wits. Then the door opened, and the main character walked in. He reassured her not to worry, that he just wanted to talk for a moment. "You can call me Officer Su." He truly had a 10-point IELTS score, which made Zhang Yangshi mishear it as Su Sha and look completely puzzled. Then, Su Qian offered her tea and started the conversation. "Seeing you were all this gold and silver, you must be quite well off, huh? It seems Zhang Yurue treated you very well." He thought that at her age, being unable to get pregnant for so many years, the problem most likely lay with Zhang Yurue. Zhang Yangshi shed crocodile tears, lamenting that after so many years, she finally had a child, only for her husband to be harmed at this very moment. Su Qian continued to ask her if Zhang Yurue frequented brothels. Of course, he did, and frequently. Hearing this, Su Qian broke into a cold sweat at the fighting spirit of this feudal-era guy. He was over 50 and still a regular at brothels. Su Qian figured that since Zhang Yurue was over 50, lingered in brothels, and was cold to his wife, it was reasonable for his wife to have a lover. Immediately after, his attitude did a 360-degree turn as he said, "But killing someone is not right." Zhang Yangshi was startled and dropped her teacup, but her mouth still denied it. Su Qian didn't let up and continued, saying he had read the case file, that Zhang Xian is younger than you by a good 7 years. Zhang Yangshi didn't understand what he meant. It's a case of an older woman preying on a younger man. Zhang Yangshi still played dumb, so Qian laid out the facts of the case. "Zhang Yangshi, you were lonely and couldn't bear the solitude, so you seduced your stepson and did something shameless. On the night of the incident, you took advantage of Zhang Yurue being away to collect rent. You had an affair with your stepson, but unexpectedly, Zhang Yurue returned early and caught you two in the act. A scuffle broke out between father and son. You used a flower vase to kill Zhang Yurue from behind. To cover up your crime, you dragged Zhang Yurue's body out to the courtyard, staging it to look like a thief broke in, robbed, and killed him. Zhang Xian intentionally left footprints on the wall to corroborate your excuse." After hearing this, Zhang Yangshi was naturally terrified. Seeing this, Su Qian knew the fish had taken the bait and said, "Do you know why I know this so clearly? It's because Zhang Xian has already confessed." Zhang Yangshi's whole body went limp like a deflated balloon. She still felt that her lover couldn't have confessed because they thought they had cleaned up everything perfectly, but Qian still saw the flaws and said, "First, Zhang Xian only left footprints going out on the wall, but didn't leave any footprints breaking in. If the thief had good skills, he would have shown his ability when escaping and wouldn't have left any footprints at all. Second, Zhang Yurue died from an attack with a blunt object, not a sharp one. According to the laws of Defeng, anyone entering a house at night without reason will be punished with 80 strokes. The homeowner can kill them without being charged. Tell me, would a thief breaking into a house not bring a weapon? But Zhang Yurue died from a blunt object. Third, why does the yamen insist that you killed Zhang Yurue and not a thief? Because you made a mistake. Zhang Yurue's body had its feet facing the house and its head facing out, with a fatal wound on the back of his head. This proves the killer struck from behind him with a blunt object. How is it possible that a robber, upon seeing the master of the house return, would intentionally kill him and then leave empty-handed? Zhang Yangshi was at a complete loss for words, not expecting there to be so many loopholes. Qian took the opportunity to continue. Zhang Xian was also cornered, so he confessed about you. He also said that you shamelessly seduced him, that he didn't want to continue the affair with you. But you used the baby baby in your belly to threaten him. And he also said that on that night, it was you who, in the chaos, killed Zhang Yurue. Zhang Xian knew that with so many loopholes, it would be difficult to escape, so he confessed to the county magistrate, willing to offer 500 taels of silver to build a relationship and push all the blame onto you. Qian's eyes shot out a bone-chilling glare as he finally said, Zhang Xian wants you to bear the crime of conspiring to murder your husband alone. Zhang Yangshi was so scared she fell to the ground with a thud. She knew best what kind of person Zhang Xian was, and although Qian didn't know, he could be as certain as if he were chopping nails and slicing iron. A relationship based on nothing but lust would not last long. Moreover, Zhang Xian was a rich second-generation heir with a family fortune and was young. A whole ocean was waiting for him, so he didn't need to stick to such a salty taste. So how could he sacrifice himself for a woman? Grasping this psychology, Qian continued to coax her as if she were a child, saying, but the county magistrate, Wei Guang, is a beacon of integrity and justice. He won't believe Zhang Xian's one-sided story, so he ordered me to come here and question you. If you confess, the county magistrate has promised to spare you from the death penalty. She grabbed onto this like a life-saving noodle and asked, really? Really? Of course it was all a lie. The young man was deceiving her. According to the laws of Defeng, a woman who commits adultery and conspires to murder her husband is to be executed by Lingqi. The adulterous man is to be beheaded and his head displayed to the public. There is no escape from death. When Zhang Xian saw her confession, it was too late to react. Oh, women are the source of all pain. With no way to argue, he could only hopelessly raise his hands and surrender. After the county magistrate reviewed the confessions of the two, he was so angry he gritted his teeth that such an immoral thing could happen. As a lover of the white spider lily, he was fair in public and private matters and acknowledged Qian's contribution. The young man acted modestly. It is thanks to your honor's teachings. This humble one has become accustomed to hearing them and has learned a few tricks. Head Constable Wong, at this moment, couldn't figure out, even if he cracked his head open, why this greenhorn with an honest personality, who was always causing trouble, was such a dangerous element. Yet in the blink of an eye, he had solved the case like a god. It was truly magical. To thank him for solving a difficult problem, he invited Qian to the Gulen for a good time. The two guys knew Qian was a fledgling and smirked, thinking the little chick was about to become a man. Qian thought he was being treated, but when he perked up his dog-like ears, he heard it was just an invitation, and whoever partook would have to pay. He couldn't even be bothered to speak. So, the young man immediately put on the label of being an upright, honest, white spider lily-loving tea connoisseur, but who knew that the real reason was that if he lost his virginity, he would never be able to reach the chi-refining realm for the rest of his life. Who could understand this pain? Speaking of this traditional brothel culture, it contains a lot of profound knowledge. The Gulen is a brothel aimed at ordinary commoners. The Qinglu, on the other hand, is more pro and expensive, specializing in a clientele of famous scholars and high-ranking officials. Isn't this just like a hair salon versus a private club? In Defeng, when talking about brothel culture, one cannot avoid the Jiaofeng Sea. Looking at old Wang's lecherous face, just thinking about the young ladies at the Jiaofeng Sea made him drool with ecstasy. And in there, a particularly beautiful girl named Fu Xiang was becoming famous. That whose initial nature was inherently evil, thought upright my ass upon hearing this. As soon as he heard those two guys rambling on about Fu Xiang, the belle of the Jiaofeng Sea, that end's eyes lit up, and he immediately asked how much silver it would cost to spend a night with her. When he heard the answer was 30 taels, then immediately turned into a shameless bootlicker, casually grabbing the clerk's peanuts and offering them to the old man, saying, "It's a small token of my great appreciation. Please accept it." That thought to himself again, 30 taels of silver could buy several young maidens to have enough people for a mahjong game at home. Only a madman would go to the Jiaofeng Sea to sleep with the top courtesan. In the courtyard of Hua That An's house, he was starting to write in his diary. After all, he wasn't an upright person. That's right, he was adopting a different way of life. Living too high profile here wasn't necessarily a good thing. Many high-ranking officials had their homes visited by thieves. The people who could survive the longest in this world were the middle class. They lived more comfortably and affluently than ordinary people, but did not participate in the battles of the upper echelons. Suffering a small loss now and then was no big deal. People in this class were the most at ease. Besides, today the guy who loves picking things up found 1 tael at the market. The monetary system here was 1 tael equals 8 mace and 1,000 cash coins. The young man wrote in his diary on October 19th, "No feast in sight, only gloomy weather." He planned to resign from his post as a constable in a few days because the salary was so low that a month's pay wasn't even enough to cover a single scrap. At this rate, he would never be able to go to the Jiaofeng Sea to spend the night with the top courtesan. Therefore, his great goal was to have money to play Lego. Diary, October 20th, the weather was still gloomy. He wasn't in a hurry to resign yet, planning to start a business first and see how it goes. Today, he felt very uncomfortable seeing his colleagues use their official documents to intimidate merchants. But he knew this was the normal state of society and he couldn't change anything. Also, he picked up another silver coin at the yamen today. October 21st, the sky was clear and blue. Today, head Constable Vong took him to the Gulen to have fun, which slightly changed his impression of the Gulen, but not significantly. It was a pleasant melody and also a place where soul and body blended together like milk coffee. He felt terrified because he was still in the essence refining realm and couldn't lose his virginity. But heaven does not fail a virgin. He later picked up a silver coin at the Gulen, which was just enough to pay for listening to the music. Next came a series of days listening to music at the Gulen, forgetting the way home. Head Constable Vong saw how happy this guy was. And of course, it was because the girls made him happy. But too many girls will one day empty your wallet. On October 27th, he listened to music at the Gulen, but today he didn't find any silver. He had to pay 1 coin for the service fee. The young man was salty as hell and swore never to come to this filthy, wicked place again. It was damn expensive. On October 28th, he discovered that this world had gunpowder and also dumb firecrackers. Although he hated alchemists, he knew how to make glass and planned to start a business. But reality put him in his place. Glass already existed here. Luckily, today that had picked up a silver coin belonging to his second uncle, making the uncle wonder where his secret stash had gone. Truly poor and unlucky. So, having money, he went to the Gulen to listen to music again the next day. After a few days, the young man came up with a money-making plan: improve paper. As long as he successfully improved the paper, he would make more and more money, eat the best food, and sleep with the most beautiful courtesan. This wouldn't be a dream. It was just a nice thought. The author is sorry, but there's no way I'm letting you have an easy life. And so, the plan was scrapped in its infancy. Instead, he picked up another silver coin today. The frequency with which this young man found money was just too high. By November 3rd, his pockets were cleaner than that Anne's face. He tried to borrow money from Uncle Hua, but the man was a broke bitch who couldn't afford his own tastes. When he tried to borrow from Hua Tannian, he was immediately looked down upon and ridiculed. But with the magic spell, heaven did not give birth to me, Hua Tannian. The Great Fang's eternal ages are like a long night, and a face thinner than rice paper. Tannian had no choice but to give his big brother 5 taels of silver. This young man, Tannian, aside from running his mouth, was actually quite a decent fellow. If he hadn't become sworn brothers with that this guy would have turned the story into a danmei. On November 5th, that and his colleagues went to the Lazy Tea House to listen to the storyteller. An idea sparked in his head. What if he wrote out the wuxian novel The Four Great Constables and other online literature from his past life? He could make money even while lying down. I'm such a smart kid. After that, this guy picked up another silver coin, so he had money to go to the Gulen and listen to music again. Diary, November 7th. Then realized he was still young and naive. How could he write a novel of several million words with a brush pen? He could only use a charcoal pencil as a substitute, but with his bottom-of-the-class literature scores, let alone writing, he couldn't even remember the plot of the novel properly. So, after a week of being transmigrated, this guy was still a good-for-nothing, a disgrace to the Transmigration Brotherhood. On November 8th, the rain today seemed to be the backdrop for the young man's dreary mood. He clearly understood a little bit of everything, yet there was nothing he could convert into silver. It was at this moment that he truly recognized the failure of the exam-oriented education system. After talking with his second uncle, he suddenly realized that this world was worse than he had imagined. Corrupt officials were as common as inflation. A slightly greedy official was considered a good one, and an honest official was rarer than winning the lottery jackpot. On November 9th, the sky was blue with white clouds, but the young man was still melancholic. He wondered why Miss Kai Wei from the Astral Observatory hadn't come to find him yet. Didn't she want the secret alchemy techniques? Whether she was a disciple of the chief supervisor or not didn't matter. The main thing was that in this society colder than the North Pole, he longed for love. Truly, the flower falls with intent, but the water flows without feeling. But actually, he wanted to rely on his future wife's family. Come find me quickly. I don't want to struggle anymore. On November 10th, this guy still couldn't accept that his novel plan had died prematurely, so he told his 2 younger sisters the general plot of the Butterfly Lovers. Hearing it, both girls were drooling, one with tears, the other with saliva. Lin A.M. just demanded to eat steamed buns, so she got a big noogie on the head. The little girl cried her eyes out, but then felt this was something she should endure at her age. On November 11th, he drank with Clerk Lai. He said that the princess consort of the Northern Protector was the #1 beauty of the current dynasty. As for how beautiful she was, he couldn't describe it because he had only heard it from the county magistrate. He asked his second uncle, who used his vocabulary, which was thinner than his wallet, to summarize the main point: a big and beautiful soul. Hearing this, the young man's blood boiled with excitement, and he greatly looked forward to meeting the princess consort. Then, on the 12th, he still hadn't achieved a damn thing, truly losing face for the Transmigration Brotherhood. Then on the 13th, upon receiving his first month's salary in this world, the young man resolved to grind hard. But it was grinding at the Gulen while being lazy at work. Today, this guy threw so many darts and didn't miss a single one, even better than Little Lee's flying slipper. He realized his body definitely had a problem. It was truly too lucky. Moreover, in 1 month, he had picked up a total of 1 tael and 2 silver coins, equivalent to half a month's salary. Normally, a family of 3 could live frugally on that for 3 months. The strangest thing was that he only ever picked up 1 silver coin at a time. No need to ask the reason. There was definitely some kind of cheat involved. He cursed Amma to hell and called out for System 33, telling it to come out and stop playing hide and seek. If there was a system, it was playing Catch Me If You Can. But a month had passed, and he had tried countless times to awaken the system, but the system had jack shit. So he never expected that a modern gambler who specialized in all sorts of betting and always won jack shit in the lottery could one day evolve into a European emperor. But European house dealer. However, one thing was certain. The original owner was not unusually lucky. If he had been, his aunt wouldn't have disliked him, but would have treated him like a precious ancestor. The whole family would no longer fight and would live by picking up money. Did you pick up any money today, son? Big Brother by Meat Candy. This gift of unknown origin made that feel panicked and uneasy. He could only take things one step at a time. It must be said that the small courtyard he lived in originally belonged to a steward of the Hua family, separated from the Hua family's main residence by a wall. After the old steward passed away, the place became empty. The original owner of this body had quarreled with his aunt and moved here in anger. This guy, like every morning, after barking, jumped over to his second uncle's house to freeload. His policy was to save money. Money should be spent where it ought to be spent, for example, listening to music at the Gullin and admiring the young ladies. At the dining table, the aunt was enjoying her meal when her appetite was ruined upon seeing this unlucky nephew show up again. Then looked at his portion. 6 meat buns, a plate of pickled radishes, a bowl of egg congee, and a bowl of tofu and soy sauce. For a martial artist in the essence refining realm, this portion was only enough to be half full. So, the young man immediately tried to trick his little sister out of her meat bun. His aunt and Uncle Hua watched with faces as black as the bottom of a pot. Of course, the little girl Lin A.M., whose magnanimity was nowhere to be found, but whose gluttony was bottomless, wouldn't allow it. The young man knew it wouldn't be that easy, so he started to play tricks. The sly fellow picked up his own meat bun and placed it on Lin A.M.'s plate, saying, "I'm putting my meat bun with yours. So those 4 meat buns belong to both of us, right? Then shouldn't we share them equally?" After pondering for a moment, the little girl Lin A.M. thought her portion was originally hers, but with her big brother's bun added, it became her portion plus her big brother's. So, Lin A.M. clapped her hands as if she understood. Then praised, "Good job, sis. Then you get 2 buns, and big brother gets 2. After that, I'll give you half of my fried dough stick. So aren't you getting a good deal?" The little girl Lin A.M. felt it was a bit confusing, but nodded her head like an owl. The aunt, watching her foolish and not-so-bright daughter from the side, held her forehead in helplessness. Just then, Tanian came out, drawing her attention. But this young man seemed to be in a daze, muttering nonsense to himself. The young man was stunned. The whole family was bewildered. Did Tan Nian just lock himself in his room? He wasn't jerking off, was he? The aunt could only advise her son. People have their strengths and weaknesses. Don't pay attention to the idle gossip outside. The truth was, Hua Tanian was good at writing essays and memorials, but poetry was his weakness. Suddenly, that caringly asked his younger brother when he would break through the aperture opening realm to the 8th rank spirit cultivating realm. Because Hua Tanian followed the path of Confucian cultivation. The Cloud Deer Academy he was attending was founded by the great disciple of the Confucian sage 1,200 years ago. It was a sacred place that scholars all over the world dreamed of. The unique status of the Cloud Deer Academy was not just because its founder was a disciple of this.